Hello everybody, welcome to UK Gaming Network. I'm Brian, also known as UKJ and Zoidberg, and welcome to another episode of Retro Game Superleagues, where I rank all of the games that I have played in a selected category. And the category we're doing in this episode is the arcade category, with the subcategory of maze games. I have 27 games that I've played in this category, and as always, I will be ranking them in one of the 5 categories here, from recommended down to rubbish. So where will your favourite game land? Let's just get on with it and find out. So the first game is a game called Blitz Bombers, which was all set for a full price release in 1996. There were even demos of it available on a couple of magazines, until the developer and publisher found themselves hit with legal action from Hudson over the similarities to Bomberman. The game was eventually given away for free in its 99% complete state in 1998. And apart from the characters, there's a lot more going on in the campaign mode here than there ever was in Bomberman. The graphics are good, even if they do occasionally make it a little bit too tricky to see where you can and can't walk. What I found really annoying though is the fact that every time you die, you lose all the power-ups that you had, which, considering how long it takes you to get them in the first place, is really infuriating. However, that's not enough to mean that this isn't a game that you shouldn't play and seek out, so I'm going to put this one straight into the recommended category. Next up we have Bob's Bad Day, which came out in 1993, published by Psygnosis and developed by The Dome. Usually the phrase "a game by The Dome" is considered a threat, because this is the developer after all that made Pugsy and Last Action Hero. Thankfully that's not the case here. This is probably the best game that they ever made. It's very similar to Taito's arcade game Camel Try, which was released as On the Ball on the Super Nintendo in the UK. Basically the idea is that you rotate the world around your character who stays in the centre, and the objective being to collect all of the coins and exit the level within the time limit. It can be fun, but there are certain elements to the gameplay that make it really frustrating to play, such as the changing gravity, and so that's what drags it down into the good category, and so that's where it's going to go. Next we have a game called Bombmania, which came out in 1995 from a developer called Megarts. And this is a woefully basic combination of Pac-Man and Bomberman that misses the point of both games. There's practically no challenge to this game whatsoever, as the enemies are incredibly easy to dispatch and offer no threats to the player. While there are a lot of levels in this game, you'd be hard pressed to see them all, as it's just so boring and you'll end up switching it off, so this is going to be the first game that goes into the rubbish category. Next up we have Bug Bomber, which came out in 1992 from Kingsoft. I can vividly remember this one arriving in the Amiga Action office and everyone loving it and playing it a lot. However, I could never really understand why, and I'm even more perplexed by that today. It's got one of the most annoying control systems going, where you hold down the fire button and then tap the joystick in the direction that you want for the different types of bombs, and it's all too easy to accidentally press the wrong one. Compounding it all is the fact that the graphics are incredibly drab and brown, with almost no character to them whatsoever, and that just makes me not want to play it. So this one's going to go in the poor category. Next is a game called Biteman, which came out in 1990 from Odyssey Software, and this has got some really nasty graphics that looked badly out of date even when it was originally released. Every single level that you'll play is a square maze that's no fun whatsoever to navigate. They don't even offer you any pathways that you can duck down to avoid enemies. What relegates this one down into the rubbish category though is the fact that it's also painfully slow to play, and then the developers even had the audacity to throw in power-ups that slow you down even further, making it an absolute pain to play. So this one is going to go below Bombmania in the rubbish category. Next up we have the Chaos Engine 2, which came out in 1996 from the Bitmap Brothers, and this is probably going to be the most divisive game on this list. It's a complete departure from what the first game was, but as soon as you get used to the fact that it's a competitive challenge game rather than a shooter, then you will have fun with it. As you would expect from the Bitmap Brothers, the graphics are excellent, although the split screen view means that you can't really see enough of the play area. All of the things that make it fun as a multiplayer game though do end up making it annoying as a single player game, as the AI opponents are very tough to beat and seem to know how to do everything right off the bat. If you are able to play this one with a friend, then you can definitely bump it up one category from where it's going, but for me this is going to go at the top of the good category. Next up we have Chips Challenge, which came out in 1990, published by US Gold and converted to the Amiga by Images. This has got some incredibly basic presentation, but do not let that put you off, as if you dismiss it for that reason, that would be a mistake. There is a huge number of levels here, and the level design has got some real ingenuity behind it. There's a real clarity to the puzzle design, but don't think for 1 second that that means that it's an easy game. The original version of this for the Atari Lynx is probably still the ultimate version of it, but this is a great conversion, and I am going to put this one in the essential category. Next up we have Deluxe PacMan, which came out in 1996 and was given away with Amiga Power magazine, and this is probably the least accurately named release this side of The Last Ninja, because that game wasn't the last, because it got 2 sequels, and this is as far from being a deluxe version of the arcade classic as you can get. This is a game that seems to fundamentally misunderstand the appeal of Pac-Man. While it features nice big sprites and fast smooth movement, the mazes themselves are too small and the ghosts have no intelligence, making it far too easy to progress through the levels. It's also hindered slightly by the fact that there are constant moments of slowdown. So this one is going to go for me in the poor category, but I think I will put it below Bug Bomber. Next up we have Deos Quest, which came out in 1993 from Infernal Byte Systems, the same developer that made Nebulous 2 and Marvin's Marvelous Adventure. And yes, it's a blatant clone of Chip's Challenge, but it's also a really good one. It's got levels where you have to collect everything as quickly as possible, ones with block pushing puzzles, ones with remote drones, ones with environmental hazards. It's got plenty of really good ideas of its own spread throughout the level, so there's always going to be a new challenge and something new to be thinking about. Presentation is also excellent, with very clear graphics full of colour and charm, and the scrolling is very smooth. So for me, this is going to go in the essential category as well, but I can't put it above the game that inspired it, so it's going to go just below Chip's Challenge. Next up we have Dino Blaster, which came to the Amiga in 1991, developed by Hudson Soft and published by Ubisoft. Now I should probably point out here that I am judging this one based on its single player mode, as I am probably going to do a multiplayer games Super League at some point in the future, where this game will then feature again. As a single player game though, I always found that it was a real test of patience, especially in the early stages, as it takes forever before the game to actually start to get really good fun. The idea from the designers to only give away 1 power-up per level I've always found to be a particularly strange choice. It absolutely does get fun though, and it's one that I would recommend that you persevere with. There are many pretenders to the throne with this type of game, but you can't really beat the original, so this one is going to go above Blitz Bombers in the recommended category. Next up we have Emerald Mine, released in 1987 by Kingsoft, and this is a pretty straightforward Boulder Dash clone with very few ideas of its own, and the graphics are also pretty basic. Thankfully they're also very clear as to what you're meant to be doing. The Boulder Dash formula is one that has been proven many times to work, and it's no exception here. Although restarting the level from the beginning every time that you die is frustrating, but you can at least save game after each one. As you get to some of the later levels you will find that the time limits are incredibly strict, but it has got a really good 2-player mode. So I think I'm going to put this one in the recommended category, but I'm going to put it just underneath Blitz Bombers. Next up we have Emerald Mine 2, which came out the following year, and you only have to look at the title screen of this one to see that it's exactly the same piece of artwork. It's just got a 2 at the end of the title, and that should make you realise that it's essentially more of the same. It's actually practically a data disk. It doesn't really fix any of the flaws from the first game or improve anything, and it's definitely aimed at people who have already played the first, so the levels are a lot tougher from the moment you start playing. I think ultimately both the Emerald Mine games were better on the Commodore 64, but the Amiga versions are still definitely worth playing. Although because this one is a blatant cash grab, I can't really put this one in the recommended category as well, so this one's going to go at the bottom of the good category. Next up we have Fast Food, which came out in 1991, developed by Optimus and published by Codemasters. And this is one of the many games where they shoehorned Dizzy into another genre in order to capitalise on the character's popularity. The idea is to run around mazes and collect up all the food, which is also running around the mazes, as quickly as possible, whilst avoiding all the enemies. There's many levels to play with some nice variety to the graphics, although I did find that on occasion the viewing angle did obscure which pathways you can walk down and which ones you can't. Ultimately it lacks the charm that you would expect to get from a Dizzy game, and I found that it was only fun for about 5 minutes at a time. So I'm going to put this one in the poor category, but it's definitely better than the two games that are in there already. Next up we have Mean Arenas, which came out in 1993 from developer Nighttime Games and published by ICE. And this is a really enjoyable attempt to spice up the Pac-Man formula with lots of power-ups and a futuristic game show theme. The gameplay is both challenging and fun, with a good variety of levels to play through. The two-player mode feels like a bit of a missed opportunity though, as you take it in turns rather than play at the same time. I should also point out that this is a game that's nowhere near as funny as it thinks it is. Some of the one-liners might raise a smile the first time that you hear them, but when you hear them for the 20th or 30th time, they really do start to wear thin. But that doesn't stop it from being a game that's going to be recommended, and I think I'm going to put this one above Emerald Mine. Next up we have Merv the Mercilus, which came out in 1989 from Probe Software, and this one was given away with issue 1 of Zero magazine. And it's a really interesting concept where you have to run around the levels and collect up everything that you can whilst avoiding touching the edge of the screen. However, because the movement of the screen is random, it means that the game can get pretty annoying. It's got some sample music that plays throughout, which does begin to grate after a while, and the graphics themselves are pretty basic. But there's one vital ingredient that could have moved this game higher up the league than it's going to go, and that's that the game doesn't for some reason have a high score table, which, considering it's a score-based challenge arcade game, is a massive oversight, and it robs the game from having a point. So this is going to go right down at the bottom of the good category, just below Emerald Mine 2. Next we come to Moonwalker, which came out in 1989, published by US Gold and developed by Emerald Software. Now this is based on the movie of the same name, which came out when I was 14 years old and I have still never seen to this day. It's nothing like either of the two decent Sega games that came out, one for the Mega Drive, one for the arcades, and it's instead a bland and tedious slog. Basically, you run slowly around a big confusing maze, gathering up collectibles until the game lets you leave, and then you do it all over again on the next level. The music, which you'd think would be the main thing to get right here, is just a really annoying 3-second loop over and over and over again, and it just makes you want to turn the sound off. At the end of the day, you'll either die from boredom while playing it, or from laughing so hard at it before you even get to the second level. So this one is going to go right down at the bottom of the rubbish category, and I think I'm going to put it below Biteman. Next we come to Pac-Mania, which came out in 1988, developed by Tech Software and published by Grand Slam. And this is an excellent conversion that I actually played to death when it was originally released, long before I ever got to experience the arcade version. The isometric view and the ability to jump over the ghosts really does work, and it adds a nice element to the Pac-Man formula. The Amiga version has got fantastic full screen graphics with fast, smooth scrolling that really does become essential on the later levels as the game speeds up. I feel it's probably a little bit easier today than I remember, and the ghosts don't seem to act in the way that you would expect, but that's a very small criticism of a game that I still really enjoy today. This one's going to go in the recommended category, and I think I'm going to put this one above Mean Arenas. Next up we have a game called Puffy Saga, which came out in 1989, developed by Butterfly Software and published by Ubisoft. It's a cross between Pac-Man and Chip's Challenge, with a little bit of Gauntlet thrown in for good measure, only it's nowhere near as good as any of those three games. Only having a single life soon becomes incredibly annoying, as it means that you have to start all the way back at the beginning every time you die. It doesn't look particularly great either, and the movement is very slow. And one thing that I found really annoying is that the game will just randomly decide to flip everything upside down when you start your next game for no reason whatsoever. So this one's going to go in the poor category, and I think I'm going to put this one below Deluxe PacMan. Next we have a game called Rock and Roll, which came out in 1989 from Rainbow Arts, and this distinguishes itself from all the other games on this list by the fact that you control it entirely with the mouse. Although the controls are probably not quite as responsive as they would need to be for the game to remain enjoyable. I also found that it's far too easy to accidentally use one of your power-ups at the wrong time, meaning that you then can't complete the current level and have to quit out and start again. If you do decide to play it though, you will be greeted with a fantastic earworm of a tune from composer Chris Hulsbeck, who made the music for Turrican. It plays constantly throughout the gameplay, and even if you play the game for just 5 minutes, it will be impossible to stop humming the tune after you turn it off. So I don't think the game's got quite enough to put it in the recommended category, but it's definitely a good one. And I think I'm going to put this one just below Bob's Bad Day. Next up we have Rockford, the arcade game, which is based on the version of Boulder Dash that was released in the arcades, and then it was converted back to the Amiga by Icon Software and published by Melbourne House. The original Boulder Dash on the 8-bit machines is still a better game than this though. One thing I will say is that it has got more character than any of the other variants on the Amiga, with the main character wearing lots of different costumes depending on which world you're playing. What drags this version down though is the fact that the joystick controls on it can be incredibly unresponsive. But even then, they're better than the mouse control option, and the less said about that, the better. The two Emerald Mine games are definitely a better option than this one, so this one's going to go right down at the bottom of the good category. Next up, we have Squeak, which came out in 1989 from French publisher Loriciel, and this is a game that you absolutely should not play if you have any aversion to the colour pink. It's a really enjoyable arcade game where the idea is to change the colour of the level by walking on every single square of it. Patrolling those levels will be a number of enemies that you have to avoid. Ultimately though, the gameplay is pretty limited, and all the levels do end up feeling the same, and I found myself getting bored of it quite quickly. So it's entertaining enough to keep it out of the poor category, but I'm going to stick this one above Rockford in the good. Now we come to a game called Spidertronic, which came out in 1988, published by Infogrames. And this is a really neat isometric arcade game with elements of Pac-Man. You control your little robotic spider around the levels, gathering up all the coloured squares in the correct order in order to gain access to the exit, all while avoiding the enemies that are roaming the stage, which you can capture in your spider webs. Some of the isometric level design can be a little bit confusing, and especially when it doesn't quite line up as you think it should. But ultimately, I did actually quite enjoy playing this one. So I'm going to put it in the good category, but I'm going to put it somewhere in the middle. I think I'll put this one above Emerald Mine 2. Next up, we have Superplex, which came out in 1991. This is a game that I did actually review for Games X magazine, but I haven't covered it on the re-review yet. Basically, the flight simulation specialists' digital integration created a new label called Dream Factory in order so that they were able to then make some arcade games. And this was the first one that they did, which was essentially a Boulder Dash clone. Everything on screen is a lot clearer here than it is in the likes of Emerald Mine and Rockford, even if the gameplay does remain largely the same. It has a really excellent opening level that puts you in a really good mood, so quite why the designers made the second level a really tedious maze with no enemies or threats whatsoever is anyone's guess. It's a shame because this one does play pretty well overall, but that one decision is what's going to stop it from being in the recommended category. So I am going to put this one in the good, and I'm going to put it above Bob's Bad Day. Next up we have Super Squeak, which came out in 1990, also from developer Loriciel. And in gameplay terms, this is not a massive leap forward from the first game, but it's unquestionably a better game than the original. It has lots of new power-ups that you can pick up and use, and everything about it just feels a lot slicker this time around. Still not an awful lot of variety though, and even though there are over 200 levels to play, and the level design is better this time around, you probably will find yourself getting bored of it before you ever finish it, and that's a shame. So it's definitely going to go above the first Squeak. I think I'm going to put it higher up the good category, and I'm going to put it above Rock and Roll. Next up we have Turb Jam, which came out in 1995 from developer Phelios Development, released as shareware. And this is a good looking attempt to bring Namco's Rallycross to the Amiga, although once again it doesn't really understand why that game was good in the first place. It was a very peculiar decision from the developer to have the controls mimic the actual driving of a car so that it plays like a racing game, when directional controls would have worked so much better. Although I should say that you do get used to the controls pretty quickly. Whereas in the original game the enemies would chase you towards the flags, in this one they just seem to move randomly around the levels instead. and that makes it a lot less fun, as it makes it much harder to predict where they're going to go, and that's what ultimately drags it down. So this one's going to go in the good category, but I can't put it any higher than where Merv the Mercilus is, so it's going to go just above that one. Next up, we have a game called Worthy, released in 2018 from a developer called Pixel Glass, and this is the newest game on the list and a perfect example of how the Amiga scene is still thriving today. It's a challenging and addictive single screen game where you have to collect up all the diamonds, avoid traps and enemies in order to prove yourself worthy to your girlfriend. Overall, it looks great with well-designed levels, although some of those levels do seem to only have a single way to complete them, and the time limits for them are very short, but that just makes you want to play them again in order to try and unlock all the medals. It's absolutely worthy of the £9 asking price, pun intended. This one's going to go in the essential category, and I'm going to put it above Deos Quest. And for the final game, we have a game called Zoom, which came out in 1988, published by Discovery Software. This is a nice 3D variation of Amiga from the same programmer who made Cyberblast and Garrison that featured in the last video of this series. And although the 3D viewing angle does look nice, it actually ends up making it harder than it should be in order to go down the right line on the level, which ultimately makes it a bit too frustrating. The two-player mode definitely extends its lifespan, and it is an entertaining game overall, but it's not going to be one that you'll come back to that often. So I'm going to stick this one in the good category, but I think I'll put it above Turb Jam. So there you go, that's 27 arcade maze games ranked for you on the Amiga. If there are any games that aren't here that you think I should have included, then it's because I haven't played them, so that's why they're not here. If you disagree with where I've placed any of these games, then please do let me know in the comments where you would have put them instead. There'll also be a link in the video description that will take you to the Amiga re-review Tiermaker page, where you can do this one for yourself and then share it with me on social media so that I can see how yours compares to mine. So as always, thank you for watching. Please do give us a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video, and if you want early access to videos just like this one, then please do also consider one of our new VIP memberships, which there will be a link to in the video description as well. Until next time, happy retro gaming. Bye for now.